You are listening to Readers and Writers with your hosts, James Hill and Athena Paris of Rock Hill Publishing. I'm Amy Ravichandran, and today we're talking anthologies. Are they beneficial for writers? What exactly is an anthology? Collaborating is sometimes a beautiful thing. So, who wants to dive into anthologies? I know you guys have been a part of anthologies. You're putting out an anthology, so, who wants to dive in about the benefits for writers engaging in anthologies?
Well, I'll go first.
All right.
All right.
Athena, you're the first one.
Athena's
All
taking the
right.
helm.
I love it.
Okay, so yes, anthologies, a grouping of stories, be they short, medium, or long. Yes, they are helpful to writers because maybe your circle of fans is limited, and if you are part of an anthology, then obviously the fans of other writers will get to see your work as well. So that's a benefit. That's a definite benefit that helps you along because you might create new fans, get new readers, people discover your type of writing. Maybe they haven't read you because they're not sure, and reading something smaller that you've written might encourage them then to read your longer works. So that is my starting of the benefit to writers.
I think that's very true. And I think, collaborating, an anthology usually has a bunch of different authors together. And so I think, one of the other benefits as a writer is you get to meet all these other author connections and their writing styles. And I'm sure that you can learn something from each one, whether what not to do, or what to do, or what works for them that might also work for you, or, you might want to collaborate in something and help market each other's books, So I think it's beneficial, in that sense, from a marketing standpoint and a marketing person. That my mind always thinks that. James, what about you? What do you think?
Well, I think as a marketing tool and as a marketing thing, we have anthologies around for a long time because Christmas is right around the corner. We're in the Christmas season, let's say, and anthologies have always been a way to market and give the consumer the best bang for their buck because you're getting multiple in the world of authors and writers. You're getting multiple stories or multiple authors because sometimes people do anthologies of their own work too, and so you might have read one thing about some guy, or you may have read one book where they wrote a novel, but then he puts out an anthology of 15 short stories that you would have probably never heard of because it's not big enough to be in a book by them, themselves. And then you have anthologies of authors, like you said before, multiple authors. So you get multiple takes on one genre, or you might get multiple different genres. Like when you do an anthology, like a Christmas anthology that doesn't really hold to any theme other than it being Christmas. Each story is about Christmas or something like that. And so as a marketing tool, anthologies have been around for a while, and they're very useful, very powerful marketing tools. And as a I would say as a tool for growth or for showcasing somebody's abilities, or it's very powerful that way too, because like I said, you get to see multiple aspects of either one person or of different people. And so it's great. I love anthologies.
Yeah, well, they make good gifts too, because for someone like me, right? I mean, I have 2 very little kids, and so I'm occupied and busy a lot of the time. But having like these short reads, where I can finish the story in one, it's like one story together, and I can finish it, and I'm like, I feel like I've accomplished something, and I'm not leaving off and like, oh man, I'm on a cliffhanger, I need to finish it, those kind of things. I think, make for great gifts and stocking stuffers and, birthday gifts and all those things, because it's like short read, it can hold people's attention, and they get to experience a bunch of different writing styles and, genres all in one, which, for me is always fascinating. I like to have things like that and have it, blended and see, you can tell the different strengths and weaknesses of some writers or genres or whatever, which I find to be, for me, amazing. Like I don't know, my mind works that way though.
Yeah,
So
I'm going to show my age here because if I remember correctly, I used to read a magazine called Anthologies, which was a science fiction magazine, which was nothing but little short stories by some of the most
oh
famous and prolific writers in the sci-fi journey. And that was great because I used to love that. That they were like 5,000 words, maybe, very short stories by
yeah,
some very famous writers. And it's one of the things that got me onto writing. It was like, oh, I can read these people and I can pick up their style and I can learn.
mm-hmm.
And so it's a great teaching tool when you read an anthology because you get to read different styles, you get to read how people phrase things and that kind of thing. Uh, so it's also a great teaching tool. And
Yeah.
and you don't see that much in the publishing world, because most publishing houses will publish an anthology of their own people.
Right.
But we recently, Rockhill Publishing recently had joined with other publishers, and we had done anthologies where and this happens with indie publishers more because we have a smaller market and we're freer, that we're not in the competition. And even though in the writer world, they say, oh, well, we're not really competing with other writers. We definitely are competing with other writers, and in publishing, we're competing with other publishing houses.
Right. Yeah.
And so,
Absolutely.
yeah. And so the indie publishers are not in that type or that type of competition, as the big five. The big five are, they're the warring countries. We're more like the small serfdoms and,
Yeah.
and smaller countries on the outskirts and stuff like that. So we're not in the nuclear arms race, but we're definitely in an economic race with other companies. And
Yeah.
so we can join forces though, and make our uh, our platform bigger,
Yeah. Your
by
author's
joining
more
with
successful.
with other indies. So
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also, a good tool for indie or, self-published authors too to participate in anthologies, right? Because, if you're not pumping out a book every 6 months or every year, being in anthologies kind of helps bridge the gap for your readers until your next book or whatever comes out, because they're still reading work from you and hearing of things that you're doing. It may not pertain to a book in your series or if you're starting a new series or whatever, but it keeps your name out there and your readers occupied, until you pump out that next book. Because, realistically, who can pump out a book every 6 months? Like it's just, working and doing all that. I mean, that's incredibly difficult. And so I think anthologies and contests for sure are a fantastic way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it keeps you active. It helps you keep you engaged in your writing skills instead of okay, I edit, so I read a lot the whole day, but I miss the writing part because I'm a writer as well. So that is very conflicting for me sometimes because I've got my own ideas going in my head about my writing, but I have to put that aside because I need to concentrate to do editing for other people. So anthologies, if I liked writing short stories, that would be a great way to sit and write these shorter works and get that thing out. But I'm not into the short story thing, but I can work on pieces of my own writing.
Right.
So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because most authors, it's not a full-time job for them. They work full-time jobs and they write and do all these things. And so it's, short stories sometimes are just a good option. If, like Athena, you were saying, you miss the writing part, when you're editing all day and doing all those things, you miss being able to write and stuff. So knocking out, 5,000 word short story or whatever can kind of help you fulfill that itch or whatever, or scratch that itch until, you can get back to your book. So, I mean, it's definitely a good option. But I mean, what are some of or if there is any, what would you say are downfalls of of anthologies? Are there any downfalls of that, or are they all pros and everyone should be participate in them? You know, what are your guys' opinion?
Well, the downfall would be a lot of time when you are in an anthology, there's no money involved.
Right.
You know, you're getting either an anthology, you're getting either copies, you know, a couple of free copies, or the publisher is making all the money. If they, you know, you go into an anthology, because it's very hard to split up $2 or $3 between 15 people.
Oh yeah.
You know, so if you're doing short story anthologies, when it used to be, and it probably still is, when you sell a short story to a newspaper or a magazine, they pay you by word, right? So you get a couple of dollars for your short story. If you're going into an anthology book, they can't pay you by word. They can't. There's really no good way of paying the person who writes and publishes in an anthology. And this is coming from my publisher point of view. I try to, for our own authors, for the Rock Hill Publishing family, we were putting out an anthology on the pandemic.
On the pandemic.
And the pandemic.
Nice.
We wouldn't do it this year because of the fact that it's still too new and still too, but next year we're going to take our experiences during this pandemic, and we're writing one about pandemics.
Right.
Whether it's this one or any kind of idea. And because we have writers of multiple genres, so we're going to put it all together, short story, put it out there, and I can actually split the money between our writers, you know.
Right.
So, but most of the time, they can't do it. It can't be done realistically. And the publishing house really don't make that much money off of it either. So it's pretty much, you don't get any money for writing anthologies, but you do get exposure. So you're trading off, you know, so that's the trade-off. You're trading money for a chance of greater exposure. So if you're looking to make it rich, you probably don't want to do anthology, but it can enrich you in the fact that people know your name, and therefore they will buy your stuff as a solo artist once they read your stuff in an anthology.
Yeah. Athena, what about you before we close out here? We have a couple minutes. What are your
That's exactly what happens. It's not a profitable way to be a writer that you can just write, unless, like James said, to write your own anthologies, create your own, because you can pump out short stories, you know, 1-2 a day. In 2 weeks, you've got enough to fill a book, maybe, you know, or in a month, you've got enough material to create an entire anthology. So if you can do that, and that people then know about you and they might enjoy your writing style, especially if you stick to one style, like science fiction or fantasy, then that might work. If you jump genres, that might be a little bit tricky, because some people don't like the mix and match and complete difference between stories. They prefer a theme or a topic, a specific topic that runs through the entire book. But otherwise, anthologies are not money-making events in any way. They just helpful to let people find out about you and your writing style.
Right. Absolutely. So, moral of this, show is anthologies, short stories. You're not going to make any money, but you will expand your reach and your audience base and fill that gap maybe in between books, or, get new readership and audience members from being in these anthologies. And the author connections and community that you build are probably, priceless, I would say. But you guys, you have been listening to Readers and Writers. We hope you have a great evening. Make sure you join us next week, because we are talking ebook gifts in the holidays, or right around the corner. So you're not going to want to miss that. Bye, everybody.